Today, we are reinventing the Mac Mini to make it minier and mightier than ever by introducing the Mac Nano. Wow, Tim, that's actually kind of cool. It's half the size. Oh, is it half the price too? No, that's not how this works, Drew, okay? It's got twice the power, half the size, same great price.
Yeah. Okay, I guess that's fair.
But thanks to the power of Apple Intelligence, you
Here we
can
go.
unlock the full power of our neural engine for only $20 a month. I'm gonna hit you so... Good morning!
Wow.
Finally, we're actually getting some interesting leaks and rumors that are not talking about hardware from 2 years into the future that are probably going to be wrong. It's refreshing that Mark Gurman actually dropped some rumors that should just be a couple of months away, okay, for this new M4 Mac Mini, which we've known for a while, of course. M2 Mac Mini never even got upgraded to the M3, so it's long overdue. It's ready for a refresh, although this probably wouldn't launch at the iPhone event next month, so definitely expect this at more of like an October/November event time frame, but still relatively not too far into the future. But he's saying Apple is finally going to be redesigning the Mac Mini to fit in a much smaller footprint, less than half the size of the current Mac Mini, which means pretty darn close to the size of our current generation Apple TVs. Probably a little bit bigger. I don't think it'll be exactly these dimensions, but not only was the chip due for an upgrade, this design is so old. Literally, Apple hasn't even really touched the Mac Mini since like 2010, so it's been like a decade and a half since they've done anything with it, and it's bizarre because this whole transition away from Intel to Apple Silicon resulted in so many design changes for the MacBook Pro line, the MacBook Air line. Even the iMac line got a little interesting with its refresh, and yet the Mac Mini, despite having so much smaller components and so much more efficient chips on the inside, mostly stayed the same. Some think it's because Apple wanted the Mac Minis to be backwards compatible with all these like server racks that people build of them. Maybe it's simply just manufacturing efficiency. I wouldn't put it past Tim Cook to be like, yeah, there's a lot of dead air inside the Mac Mini, but you know what? That would take time and effort to re-engineer, so let's just leave it the same. But Quinn from Snazzy Labs does bring up a good point, that especially if they're going to be putting not just the M4, but also the M4 Pro chip in the Mac Mini, trying to stuff all of that with a decent cooling system and a power supply inside such a small form factor, yeah, they might have to pull some shenanigans to make it work. Like, for example, the original HomePod had an onboard power supply, whereas the HomePod Mini relied on a power brick. So that's why, in case you notice, the original HomePod just has a small, simple little power cord, but the HomePod Mini has this giant brick on the end. It's to save space on the inside of the device. I wonder if maybe for the Mac Nano, hypothetically, they would move to having kind of like a giant brick on the outside. I wouldn't put it past them, especially looking at the 24-inch iMac. That has a big brick. In fact, they even moved the Ethernet port to that brick. But I'm not sure if that's something Apple would want to explore, just because there are people who like to buy up a bunch of Mac Minis and like stitch them together and have networking between them. If each one required their own designated brick, I don't know, that might be kind of awkward and weird, but still problems nonetheless that Apple is likely having to figure out as they shrink the Mac Mini finally for the first time in over a decade. I'm just hopeful that if they are making them much smaller, that they don't compromise too much on the I/O. Like, maybe this would be a great chance for Apple to kind of combat everybody, like all of those businesses that were affected by the CrowdStrike outage. Delta already was saying some nice things about Apple because of how horrible the whole blue screen Windows issue was. So if they send out Mac Minis that still have some USB-A ports, which normally I'm against, but you know, if they're trying to win over some market share here, they probably should still have them. And they still have HDMI ports on the back and all that. That could mean like hundreds of different big businesses out there could just buy up a bunch of Mac Minis and connect them to all of their businesses' existing external monitors, keyboards, and mice. They wouldn't have to buy a bunch of new accessories. Maybe this is Apple's way of quickly gaining a bunch of market share and kind of flooding the market with M4 chips just by making a smaller Mac that's powerful but still really affordable. I just hope that it doesn't come too much at the compromise of performance, because so far the M4 chip is only in the iPad Pro, which is very thin, very light, there's no active cooling system, and they recently stopped using active cooling, like having a physical fan, in the latest generation Apple TVs, and those are typically just using a series of chips, whereas the M4 M4 is probably going to be a bit more power hungry, but I could see a situation where Apple just decides, you know what, people buying the base model Mac Mini, they don't need anything too fancy, so let's just have the regular M4 Mac Mini has no fan, and it's just passively cooled with like a heatsink. But then if you opt for the M4 Pro Mac Mini, then that one has an active cooling system and of course more performance cores. So that's the one you buy if you want more speed. But for the everyday person, you know, the M4 chip is still probably plenty, even if it doesn't have active cooling. It would just tick off a lot of the nerds out there for sure. But it would be interesting to finally have a Mac that we could actually like adhere to the back of the Studio Display or the Pro Display XDR, so it doesn't actually have to take up like desk space. Like, I basically get the dream iMac I always wanted. One size bezel all the way around, no chin to worry about, and that's going to be way more doable with a smaller Mac like this than it would be the current Mac Minis, which are a bit more bulky. And it would technically be like the first Mac that you could really fit in your pocket. The best Mac is the one you have with you. But what do you guys think of these ideas? Honestly, it sounds like the most exciting thing of the year because I feel like Apple's just way too obsessed with making all things bigger, and it's refreshing to finally hear that they're trying to reduce the footprint of one of their more popular product offerings. So feel free to drop down all of your wishes and speculations in the comments below. And thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. It seriously helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. This is your Apple Ship here, and I will see you all in the next one.